Guys, welcome to the chapter 10 of the Extinguish Your Anger course. This is the most important chapter of the whole course, guys. You may go through it multiple times, and please, if you need it, take notes if necessary. In this chapter, we are going to use all the exercises we have done so far in the last 14 days to extinguish our anger. Remember what you need to start a fire? We need fuel, we need oxygen and heat. Without fuel and heat, there can be no fire. Similarly, in this chapter, you will learn how to take the fuel out of your anger and then kill it by removing the heat. So how do we experience the worldly conditions? By sight, by hearing, smelling, tasting, bodily sense of touch and hot or cold, and thinking. So if any of these things are experiencing a loss, being unloved, blame or insults, or pain, it results in a dislike towards that sight, hearing, smelling, tasting, touch, or thinking. But for many days, we've been logging our anger triggers in our EYA diary, and you know by now that none of these conditions which we experience by these 6 ways are permanent. All of them are always temporary, all of them always change, and they are not permanent. And every time we become angry, it is because of a new anger trigger caused by the same process, experiencing loss, being unloved, blame, including insults, or pain by these 6 ways. So throughout the course, we've been talking about what anger is and how you should see anger for what it actually is. So anger is a mode of mental state that feels dislike towards anything we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, or think. Guys, I'm going through this over and over again because this is very, very important. And if we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, or think any of these worldly conditions, we dislike it. And that dislike is the root of anger. It is the fire. If you let it grow in an uncontrolled manner, it can be so destructive. It can even destroy lives. So we need to control this fire before it gets out of control. And once it becomes controllable, we need to kill it. Similarly, we need to control our dislike towards our experiences and kill it to extinguish our anger. So we see one of these, or hear one of these, smell one of these, taste one of these, feel one of these, or think one of these, and we have dislike, and that dislike is the root of the anger. It is the fire, and if we can get rid of this dislike, we get rid of anger. So removing this dislike is same as letting go of that burning coal you're holding on to. So once you let go of this burning coal, it can't burn you. So we said that if we don't like what we see, we get angry. Maybe we don't like it only a little. In this case, it makes us slightly angry. But if we don't like it a lot, it can be a raging anger. But whether it's big or small, anger is anger. And you need to understand that small fires grow into bigger ones, uncontrollable ones, very, very fast. So anger is simply a dislike towards what you see. Correct? Basically a dislike. So in this lesson, we are going to talk about how we can get rid of this dislike to get rid of anger. So how do we do it? We do it by understanding how we perceive the worldly conditions we dislike and by looking at the impermanent nature of the components involved in seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and thinking. Let's take seeing for example. So what is seeing? You have the eyes, you have the external object, and you have visual consciousness, and all these 3 things comes in contact And then you have a good, bad, or a neutral feeling. You identify what you see. If you are seeing this object for the first time, your memory records it. So the next time these three comes into contact, it will identify what you see immediately. And also, when these three comes into contact, we have intention. And this intention can change with the level of dislike towards what we see. If the dislike is at a very, very high level, you can even have intention to hurt someone badly. So let's look at whether seeing is permanent. So seeing is when all these 6 things comes together. So are your eyes permanent? No, they are not permanent. Is the external object permanent? No, it is not permanent. Is your visual consciousness permanent? No, it is not permanent. If you have a good, bad, or neutral feeling, are these permanent? No, they are not permanent at all. And identification is not permanent at all. As soon as you see something else, you identify something else. And this intention is also not permanent. So what you see is all the components involved in seeing is not permanent. So how can seeing be permanent? So seeing is not permanent as well. So similarly, let's look at hearing. We have the ears, we have a noise, we have ear consciousness, and all these three comes into contact, and you have a good, bad, or neutral feeling, and we have identification, and then we have intention. But like the seeing, none of these are permanent. None of them. So hearing is not permanent. Similarly, smelling. You have the nose, you have the source of scent, you have the nasal consciousness, you have the good, bad, or neutral feeling, you have the identification of what you smell, and you have intention. But none of these are permanent, so smelling is impermanent. Same with tasting. We have the tongue, we have food or drinks, we have the tongue consciousness, we have the feeling, good, bad, or neutral, and we identify what we taste, and we have an intention. But none of these are also permanent. So tasting is impermanent. So looking at our sense of touch, you have the body, you have a touch, you have a physical consciousness, you have the good, bad, or neutral feeling, and you identify what you're touching, and we have intention. And none of these are permanent, so the sense of touch is impermanent. And similarly, we have thinking. We have a mind, we have our thoughts, the never ending thoughts, and we have mental consciousness. And once these three comes into contact, you have a good, bad, or neutral feeling, and we identify that thought, and we have intention towards that thought. But all these 6 things are impermanent. So thinking then is impermanent. So this is what we are going to use to bring the fire under control. And by now, if we have done all the activities as we were supposed to consecutively in the last 14 days, we know 3 things firmly. We know how to think about impermanence of our senses because we have been reciting them, we have been thinking about them silently for at least 10 minutes a day. If you haven't been practicing it, you need to stop here and go back to chapter 5 and follow the course properly. Otherwise, you cannot expect good results. And secondly, we also know what anger is. We know that anger is simply a dislike towards any of the worldly conditions. And we have been writing in our EYA diaries when we get angry hundreds of times now. So now we can easily identify when we don't like what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, or think. And thirdly, we know that dislike is the fuel and heat of the fire we need to remove to extinguish the anger. So now when we come across a worldly condition that we dislike, we need to practice to direct our thoughts to the impermanence nature of the components which experience that worldly condition, whether it is seeing, by hearing, by smelling, by touching, by tasting, or by thinking. So basically, when we identify that we have experienced an anger trigger, you need to redirect your thoughts to your sight, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, or thinking, based on whichever was the way you experienced that anger trigger. Mostly we experience anger triggers by sight, hearing, and thinking. So if it is by sight and hearing, you need to redirect your thoughts to your sight and to your hearing, exactly as we have been practicing for so long with reference to the current situation. For example, if the anger trigger was a driver of a car you see who is breaking rules, you first identify that you don't like this sight and you immediately redirect your thoughts to how you practice impermanence in your impermanence meditation, like you have done every day for at least 10 minutes daily. So you see this driver breaking rules, and that is your anger trigger, and you identify that you dislike that experience, and then you immediately redirect your thoughts to the impermanence of sight. So you think to yourself, these eyes are impermanent, the physical object you see is impermanent, this eye consciousness is impermanent, and the bad feeling from the contact of these three is impermanent. The identification of the driver breaking rules is impermanent, and intentions arising because of the contact of these three things are impermanent, and therefore seeing is impermanent. If you can still feel the anger in you after thinking about the impermanence of these six things, you need to repeat it. You need to repeat it over and over again until your anger is diminished. And similarly for your ear. For example, if you hear your partner say something you dislike, you should not respond. I repeat it, please do not respond. Especially if you can't speak pleasantly. Remember, you promise yourself every day, morning and evening, that you are not going to use harsh words. If you open your mouth to speak, the words need to be kind, truthful, and useful. If they are not going to be kind, if they are not going to be truthful, and they are going to be basically useless, don't speak. Because it's only going to bring you grief, nothing else. And coming back to the situation, when your partner says something you dislike, you respond by redirecting your thoughts to your ears. If the situation is such that your partner was standing in front of you and you can't do it while he's standing in front of you, you just tell him that you need to relax your head and move away from that place. And as you move away, you need to redirect all your thoughts to the impermanence of the ears. I know this can be difficult at first, but as with anything, you need to practice. Practice makes perfect. So while you move away, you redirect your thoughts to the impermanence of hearing as soon as possible. So you think to yourself, these ears are impermanent. This sound is impermanent. This ear consciousness is impermanent. This bad feeling is impermanent. This identification is impermanent. And these intentions arising within you to respond to this worldly condition you dislike is impermanent. And if all these six things are impermanent, then this hearing is impermanent. And guys, you don't need to think about these 6 things exactly the way you practice in your impermanence meditation. You can change it as per the situation, and you can put words in here to make it more relevant to your situation. This makes it even more effective. And as I said before, this can be really difficult at first. But ask yourself whether you can learn to drive by sitting in the passenger seat. No, you cannot. Now you are in the driving seat and you need to put your 100% effort to redirect your thoughts to the whatever of the senses which triggered your anger. And similar to this, you do the same thing for your tongue, body, and mind, especially to the mind. When you think about something you dislike, as soon as you identify you dislike your thought, for example, you are thinking about how badly your boss treated you in front of your workmates, you need to stop there and redirect your thoughts to the impermanence of the mind. And you think your thoughts are impermanent as well. Your mental consciousness is impermanent. And the bad feeling you have because of the contact of these 3 things is impermanent. This identification of this thought is impermanent. And the intention is impermanent as well. And you need to do this over and over again until you crush anger. A common train of thoughts are about a fight we just had with our partner. When these thoughts come flowing in and burning your head, you need to identify that these thoughts are ones you dislike and you need to stop entertaining them. You need to redirect your thoughts to the impermanence of the mind, these thoughts, this mind consciousness, these bad feelings, identification, and bad intentions. This way, rather than getting consumed with anger and letting anger win, you take the first step to win the battle against anger. You control your anger by doing this, and we will kill the anger for good next. Now we look into our second weapon. It is nothing but a splash of water to the fire which is starving from fuel. You have removed the fuel of the fire by redirecting your thoughts to the impermanence of how you experience the worldly condition. After redirecting our thoughts to impermanence, the second step is to wish the source of anger metta. So you diminish your anger arising within you with impermanence thoughts and completely extinguish it with metta. For example, say that your partner says something you dislike and you identified it. You redirect your thought process to impermanence and you see that rather than getting consumed with anger and letting anger win, you are controlling your anger. If you let anger go uncontrolled, you will shout back and it can result in long periods of agony to you and your loved ones. Just think, can you put out a large fire with a bucket of water? To put out a fire with a bucket of water, you need to make the fire small enough to extinguish it. Similarly, once you get angry, you bring your anger under control by impermanence thoughts, and now the fire is small enough to kill it with metta. For example, once you have redirected your thoughts to impermanence and it is under control, if your partner's name is Adam, we redirect metta thoughts towards Adam. It is very difficult at first, but remember how you learn to drive, always. It was not easy at first, but later it became second nature to you. It is the same with this. So coming back to the situation, Adam said something you don't like, and you identified anger arising in you. You redirected your thoughts to impermanence, and now once the anger is under control, you wish Adam metta to kill the fire. You do it like, may Adam be free of sorrow. May Adam be free of disease. May Adam live a happy and peaceful life. May Adam prosper in wealth and success. May Adam be free of greed, dislikes, wrong perceptions, and ego. May Adam be free of hatred, anger, jealousy, pain, and suffering. May Adam receive love, compassion, and kindness. And by now you have practiced this for 14 days and you have memorized it and it is engraved in your head and it is so easy to recall and redirect it towards anyone in a split second. That is the reason why practicing metta thoughts for at least 10 minutes a day was so important. Because if you haven't done it for the 14 days, it will be very, very difficult for you to do this now. And coming back to the situation, once you wish Adam metta, you need to repeat this over and over again until the anger is fully extinguished. And also important is, if the situation of anger trigger doesn't involve another person, you need to wish metta to yourself. Then you exactly follow this section. May I be free of sorrow. May I be free of disease. May I live a happy and peaceful life. May I prosper in wealth and success. May I be free of greed, dislikes, wrong perceptions, and ego. May I be free of hatred, anger, jealousy, pain, and suffering. May I receive love, compassion, and kindness. And you need to keep at it until you completely extinguish your anger. Guys, write these things down if you need to. Go through this chapter again and again if you have to. You need to master this art, and your life is going to be so much better without the weeks and weeks of agony and pain you experience from the damages of anger. But you need to understand that this process can be difficult at first, but always remember the driving example. You had to try, and then it was second nature. Similarly, you need to apply this concept over and over again, and it will be like eating cake. You only need practice, and practice makes perfect. So from today onwards, we are going to make changes to how you make your EYA diaries again. So we are not going to write all of that stuff we have been writing so far. We are only going to write the anger trigger, and also we are going to write whether you manage to redirect your thoughts to impermanence and metta. That's it. You only need to write the anger trigger and whether you manage to redirect your thoughts to impermanence and metta. That's it. Because by now you understand that most of the entries you put in your EYA diary have the same anger trigger. This is very, very important, guys. You have the same anger trigger and you practice redirecting your thoughts to impermanence and metta continuously over and over again. It's going to be easier and easier to win your battle against anger. And you can also practice on even small situations you feel disliked. The more you practice, the more chances you have to win your battles against anger in bigger situations. Remember that. Practice makes perfect. And as always, you need to tick your checklist every day to remind yourself to do the stuff, to do the activities, and also to keep a record of what you have done throughout the course. And guys, with that said, I'll see you in the next lesson.